David, we could probably listen to that music all day long, right?
I was enjoying that.
Pretty
I was
good
zoning
tune.
out a bit.
Hey, welcome so much. Everyone, welcome back to Seniors, my podcast. And today, I have an exceptional guest whose life story is deeply intertwined with one of the most beloved musical groups in history, the Beatles. And joining us is David Bradford, a true Liverpudlian who grew up in the Dingle area, just a stone's throw away from where Ringo Starr was born. So, for many of my senior listeners, those of you listening, the Beatles weren't just a band. They were literally the soundtrack of our youth, and they shaped our lives, the cultures, and memories. And David brings to us today a unique perspective on this iconic group, having authored several influential books like Liddypool, Birthplace of the Beatles, and the Fab One 104, The Evolution of the Beatles. He has dedicated his career to uncovering the stories behind the music that defined a generation, our generation, and making him a wonderful resource for those wishing to reminisce about the good old days or learn more about their favorite artists. What's more, David doesn't just write about the Beatles, he actively engages with their legacy as part of John Lennon's original Quarrymen, performing in Liverpool and beyond. His connection to the past resonates with so many of us, especially as we reflect on how music can evoke emotions and memories. He's also the chair of governors, or has been, at the Dovedale School, where John Lennon and George Harrison once attended. David also plays a vital role in passing down this rich cultural history to younger generations as well. And he reminds us all of the importance of community, creativity, and shared experience. So, whether you have fond memories of dancing to the hits of the Beatles or simply appreciate the impact they've had on our culture, and they have had an impact on our culture, today's conversation is sure to resonate with you. So, please join me in welcoming Dave Bradford to the podcast. And David, I can hear the applause from afar as people as people are joining us. So, David, tell us where are you coming to us from today, and tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so as you said in the intro, I grew up in the Dingle, literally at the bottom of the street where Ringo was born, and I went to the primary school that Ringo had gone to, St. Silas. Though I would point out he's 25 years older than me.
Yeah,
'Cause I
yeah,
was once asked, was I at school with Ringo?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not quite sure if that's a compliment to him or an insult to me. I haven't worked that one
Yeah.
out yet.
There you
Um,
go.
so I lived in the Dingle area till I was 24. And then after I got married, wife and I moved out to where I am now, which is just off Penny Lane, which
Okay.
you've probably heard of.
Uh-huh.
And our three daughters were born in the same hospital John Lennon was born in, and all attended Dovedale School, as you mentioned, which is where John and George also attended.
Yeah. You had no choice in this.
My whole life, I have had the Beatles around me.
Oh, well, so what brought you to writing was actually an illness that you
Yes.
suffered, correct? Tell us a little bit about that and how that literally changed your life so you were able to, and it was probably from upstairs that all of this happened. I mean,
Oh, absolutely right.
yeah, things happen for a reason, and not that any illness is a good thing, but it's a good thing for those of us who want to share in what you have to say and what you have to write and share those experiences. So tell us a little bit about the illness and how it transformed you into becoming a writer.
So when I left school, I joined an insurance company, and I worked for them right up till I was 35. I was business development manager, sales guy. I had a fabulous job, great career, really enjoyed it. And so my wife and I, we got three young daughters, and then towards the end of 1998, I started just getting a bit of pain in one of my shoulders. Just thought I'd injured it. Went to the doctor. did some blood tests and stuff, and he came back and said, you've got rheumatoid arthritis, which to get at 35, it was, okay, brace yourself. You may be in a wheelchair by the time you're 50.
Oh, good grief.
So that was scary. And there I was, say, at 35 with a mortgage, a wife and three kids. So I was getting treated for the rheumatoid arthritis, loads of tablets thrown down my neck, none of which were working. And when my consultant said, you're getting better, I said, no, I'm not. I feel terrible. And he said, no, you're not. You're fine.
Hmm.
I thought, okay, I'm giving up speaking to you. Went back to my normal GP and I said, look, he's just not listening. And he said, right, okay, I'm going to send you for a second opinion. And that was 2001. By then, my doctor had already signed me off work, and I'd been off work for a year, still been given all these tablets and nothing working. And eventually, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
So that is, for those who don't know, it's a chronic pain condition. So I have chronic pain in my joints, my muscles, the fibers, tendons, joints, everything, 24/7. And because they still aren't sure what causes it, there's no cure for it. All you can do is treat symptoms. And I had a wonderful doctor. And when he'd first signed me off, he said, right, you've got to face it, because I was very active. You know, through work, you know, we played football, played cricket, played golf.
Yeah.
And he said, that's going to go very soon. And within probably 6 months of being signed off work in 2000, walking 50, 100 yards was painful. And so my doctor was really good. And he said,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
this is my advice. You can sit at home and you'll be in pain and you'll probably feel sorry for yourself. Or what you can do is find something to occupy your mind. Because if your brain is concentrating on something, it can't be thinking of the pain
Right.
at the same time.
Yeah.
Best advice I was ever given. Absolutely brilliant. Now, all this, as you say, and everything's organized from up above, I stopped planning my life a long time ago. At the exact time I was getting signed off work, which was June 2000, through the children's school, we were looking for money for a fundraising project for the playground. And the person who responded to our appeal was Yoko Ono.
Really?
Yep.
Okay,
And Yoko,
I have not heard this story before, and I've listened
well,
to you a lot on podcasts
yeah,
and other things, but this is an interesting
yeah.
story.
This is what got me started. So Yoko got in touch and said, how much money do you need? And we needed about, I think it was something like £26,000. And she said, okay, I'll give you £30,000 to cover everything you want to do and have a little bit of money in reserve as well. Said, because John loved his time at Dovedale.
Mhm.
Said he had very fond memories. He mentioned it. He'd kept a report card and a few other things. And so she came over to the school, met the children, has been over several times, given more money, done various other amazing things in Liverpool in John's memory. And I thought, hang on, this isn't Yoko Ono I've been reading about.
Yes,
Everybody's telling about this witch who broke up the Beatles.
right?
That can't be right.
Yeah.
So while there, I met a guy who'd been at Dovedale in the year between John and George. So we knew them both. And I got talking to him, and he was writing his story of growing up in the Penny Lane area and of knowing two of the Beatles. But he was no good, as you were mentioning in the intro. He was not good with tech at all.
Yeah.
And he had to be emailing this stuff to the magazine editor. Didn't have a clue how to do it. Well, in the insurance company, I'd started on basic computers in 1983, and we were working on laptops and all kinds. So I was well used to that. So I said, I'll send it down by email for you. So I sent it to the editor and said, by the way, would you be interested in this story about Yoko giving us this money to the school? And he said, absolutely. So that was the very first thing I ever wrote
I'll be
about
darned.
the Beatles. So about Yoko giving the money.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I said, so, because this was the London Beatles fan club I was writing for. And I said, is anybody else covering stories in Liverpool? And he said, no. I said, do you want me to? Yeah. And that's how it started. So it was to give me something to do. And again, discussing this with my doctor. And he said, It keeps your brain active.
Right.
Do
Well,
it. Get
and
in. And that's what I did.
wow, I have a sister. She's passed now, but that same kind of thing. Fibromyalgia. No one knew what caused it. You probably still don't have any idea, do you?
No,
They never found it. Whether
no.
it's diet or hereditary or whatever it might be. And it was the same thing. She was a teacher and she couldn't teach anymore. She couldn't walk.
No,
Like you mentioned, she was
exactly.
in pain 24/7. So I guess your story leads us into a question I don't have written down. I wasn't planning to ask you, but so what is maybe the biggest misunderstanding we all have of Yoko Ono, right? Because just as you said, living here and seeing her in the recording sessions and so forth, sitting side by side with John Lennon, kind of like this, ball and chain, so to speak, that was seemed to all of us, it was right near him, had to be just very difficult for the other members to
Yeah.
have, her in the studio and in their lives because she changed everything so drastically. So what's the biggest misunderstanding we might have of Yoko Ono?
I think that I think people see because she was there at a time when the Beatles are beginning to break up,
Yeah.
that it was her fault. Though I would say if Yoko didn't go into the studio with John, I think John would have quit a lot earlier.
Hmm.
She's probably the reason why he stayed with them longer.
Yeah.
Just that ability, because it's one of those things, John had gone through all these traumas in his childhood.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I got to do was a documentary film called Looking for Lennon. And we spent the time interviewing only people who knew John from primary school right the way through secondary school, through the Quarrymen, everything. People who understood and knew John.
Yeah.
And it really focuses your mind on all these childhood traumas. He's taken away from his mum when he's 5.
Yeah.
His Uncle George, who he lives with, becomes his father figure, drops dead at the age when John's 14. He gets close to his mum again, who's knocked down and killed by a car when he's 17. He gets close to Stuart Sutcliffe, who drops dead from brain hemorrhage, age 21. So
Mhm.
John had all this trauma
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
And like he says, by 65, when he writes the song Help, he said, I was numb. He had no contentment. Everything he thought would bring him happiness, money, fame, girls, you name it, none of it worked.
Isn't that usually
Uh,
the case though, with so many people, right?
yeah,
Money,
yeah.
fame, whatever it might be, it doesn't bring happiness. It does.
There was no happiness there at all.
Yeah.
And I don't think he'd ever found somebody who understood him. He had such an amazing imagination,
Yeah.
and he'd never found somebody he could connect with. And then suddenly he meets Yoko, who connected with him on that level he'd been searching for all these years. And I think the two of them understood each other
Hmm.
in a way that nobody else did. I don't think anybody properly understood them as a couple, but they met
So,
and immediately they clicked.
well, and so what was her past? What briefly, where'd she come from? I mean, how did he find her? What was that?
That's down in London. So she was already a conceptual artist. She'd been doing events um, down in London
Yeah.
for quite a while. She'd done one in Liverpool
Yeah.
before they met. So she was born in Japan, grown up in New York, from a wealthy banker's family.
Hmm.
And it was at one of her art exhibitions in London. And John and Paul were both sort of getting to avant-garde art things.
Sure.
And so John, being famous at this point, which I think was 1966, gets a private viewing the day before the exhibition opens. So he goes in there just to check it out. And he was just intrigued by this strange, quiet little woman.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one of the big things, he looked up and there's a step ladder and a magnifying glass up by the ceiling. So he climbs up the ladder, used the magnifying glass, and written in very small print says yes. And he said, if that had said no, I'd have walked out. So he comes back down
Yeah.
and then they start talking and they have a conversation. And it ends up with them both being cryptically surreal and they just understood each other straight away. Now, they don't get together for another 2 years, but they clicked. Now, John was already married to Cynthia,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they got married young when Cynthia got pregnant. So they got married very quickly.
Yeah.
Now, they loved each other, um, but Cynthia was a completely different character. She was quieter, she's more submissive, a very loving lady, but not what John needed. And I think he realized that once you meet Yoko, that here's somebody who understands his quite surreal brain,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's how they connect.
Wow, that's a great story. I had absolutely no idea of that. Hadn't learned of that. And I also didn't know until doing a little bit of, research for our talking together today, about I guess you could call it the affair or the time when John was away from Yoko when they were separated and the photographer, I think it was the photographer for Yoko, or was it who?
She was a personal assistant. She
Yeah,
she worked she worked for May Pang.
and I don't know where, I don't think it's hidden. I don't think I ever dug deep enough or really knew about that affair, if you will, or relationship. Really wasn't an
Yeah,
affair. That relationship he had with this gal, and it looks like a perfectly beautiful time that he spent with her.
it was a mixed time because actually it was Yoko who set it up.
Yeah, of all
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Decided John needs some time away.
yeah, and so I mean, does that prove she was really seriously looking out for his well-being? I mean,
It's hard to understand because he then goes off on what's called his lost weekend.
the lost weekend?
Yeah, so that's about 18 months
Yeah,
and very creative. So one of his best solo albums, Walls and Bridges, he creates that. May Pang is involved in that as well.
yeah.
But then at other times, he's just hanging out, particularly with Harry Nielsen
Hmm.
down in LA, and they're just getting so drunk and causing trouble wherever they went.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, John refers to it as his lost weekend, but it's 18 months that he was with May. Now, May was completely in love with him, and still is to
hmm,
this day.
hmm.
Um, and she's a lovely lady, met her several times. But John, then I think he's away and sort of enjoying himself and partying. But again, coming back to what we were just saying, it wasn't making him happy.
Yeah,
And he realizes that he needs to be back with Yoko. And they get in touch with each other, and John goes back.
yeah.
And then not long after that, Yoko then has Sean,
Hmm.
and so they have a child together, born on the same day as John, 9th of October.
Yeah, yeah.
And John says, "Right, I'm giving up music, and he's just going to be a house husband."
Mm.
And that's what he does. And he absolutely loved his time learning to bake. He could listen to music, do stuff, but his primary concern was looking after Sean.
Well, and Sean's story is something that's pretty interesting as well. I hadn't listened to his music, and it's just haunting, to listen to him,
Yeah,
you know, um, because he sounds so much like his father, and he's had to live with that as well. It's got to be
yeah,
so difficult. I know many people, including myself, that live under the greatness of a father, that did so many things.
yeah.
And for Julian, it's been especially yeah, challenging for him. Do you have connections with Julian at all? Do you have
No,
a
I mean, during, as you say, he had some great music came out in the 80s.
yeah?
But then I think he realized that he didn't want all that fame and all that attention because he looked like his dad. He sounded like his dad.
I know how
And then,
terrible. I mean, how wonderful, but how terrible. I mean, you can't
yeah,
escape it.
no. But
Um,
he's kept making music, made some great music. Um, and he sort of got drawn into the London club scene and everything. And again realized, "Nah, I don't want this."
yeah.
And he moved to France and he's lived out there for many, many years now.
Yeah.
And he's still every now and again, he does some photography. He's a great photographer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and also then he's still been making some music, but as and when he wants to,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully he doesn't financially have to do anything and he's not, put in a corner because of that. So,
Yeah,
February 9th, 1964 is a date that all of us, know
yeah.
and remember. I was 10 on that evening watching the Ed Sullivan Show with 73 million other people. So I wasn't the Lone Ranger, but
Yeah.
it was one of those turning points in my life, even really unknowing it until honestly I knew I wanted to play music at that point, and it probably was the best direction that I might go into. But I was 10, I was just
Yeah.
10. At 12, I heard the recording Paperback Writer, and that's when I knew that I had to play music, and I was going to play music, and formed a band at age 12, and that was the first song that we ever played, when I was,
Wow.
that young. And another, this isn't about me, but another, transformational day event for me, really unrealizing that it might be, was when I attended a Cirque du Soleil,
Mm,
the Love uh,
love show.
in Las Vegas. I was invited to go on a business trip with somebody, and I sat with a group of 7 people, and they're just, none of them musicians or anything like that, and probably none of them knew that, I'm a musician, or was at one time, right? I'm not busy like you, still playing, but at one time, and sitting there, uh, it was crazy. It was like I was seeing my life go by, before my eyes, uh, and I think so many other people have had those things. And
Mm.
so I asked people that listen to my podcast. I reached out to a few people and I said, "Do you have any questions? Let's stump the band, so to speak." And not really, but do you have any questions for David that maybe you would like to know, and maybe you haven't written one of the 9 books that you have written or co-written, and I think I got the number correct, David.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
9 books that you've done, and so one of the questions I have, from Jane Lillibridge on Facebook, she asked me if, in your opinion, if the Beatles could have done everything all over again, or if there's one event that might have changed everything, can you think of anything that might have happened that would have kept them together, from, their breakup the last time they played, which was, gosh, in 1969, I think, at the Rooftop. I think that was.
Rooftop, January 69.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that insight you have on, that you can pinpoint and say, if this would have happened, maybe they would have stayed together?
Do you know what? I couldn't have asked for a better question to be asked,
Yeah.
because the book, my ninth book, which has just been published this year with my friend Andrew Phillips, is called The Beatles What If?
Yep.
And we've taken 70 key moments in Beatles history. And at each point, we've asked, what if it worked out slightly differently? What would the outcome have been? And no, so sometimes some things would have meant that was the end of the story. They wouldn't have got past it. Other
Yeah.
times, they still would have been famous, but not as famous.
Yeah.
Other things, it wouldn't have made a difference. And there's lots of those key moments where they may not have even got together
Sure.
in the beginning. No, simple things like, and Brian Epstein is really key to this. If they don't meet Brian and Brian doesn't become their manager, they don't get a record deal.
Right.
So they would never got out of Liverpool.
Yeah.
And at the time he discovers them at the end of 1961, they're in black leathers and they're playing everything loud, and they're chewing, they're drinking, they're eating, they're smoking on stage. He makes them professional. And it's his contacts in the record retail trade that eventually gets him in front of George Martin. And George Martin had said when he met Brian for the first time, He said, I wasn't that impressed with the music I was hearing, but he was a very earnest young man. And I thought, what harm can it do? I'll give them an audition. So Brian is key
Yeah.
to getting them to fame. I think the big turning point in the Beatles story is when Brian dies.
At 29, right?
There was 32 he was by that time.
32. Okay.
And that was in the August of 67. And the Beatles had stopped touring in 66. So Brian's role was sort of diminished a bit, and he was feeling as if maybe he didn't need to be there as much. But what proved that he was needed
Yeah.
was when he dies suddenly. There's four guys without a manager,
Yeah.
and they'd always said they would never have another manager. And so suddenly they're stuck. Brian's gone, and the dynamic has to change. And what happens is Paul is the one who's desperately trying to keep them together. So he keeps coming up with project ideas, which will help give them and keep them excited and want to keep doing stuff together, which includes the Let It Be project, where they end up on the rooftop.
Hmm.
What happens is then the dynamic within the four of them has changed. It was always John's group. He never had to sort of say he was, but everyone deferred to him as leader.
Yeah.
With Paul now taking on that role of coming up with new projects, he's now taking on more of a managerial role as well.
Yeah.
And the dynamic
Well,
within
he
the
did.
band.
He did, David. But do you think Lennon would have taken that, been able to do that? I don't see it.
No,
When I watched the Get Back TV series thing,
yeah,
it was so evident that McCartney was running the show, and
yeah,
it was also kind of sad. At least maybe I took it the wrong way, but his interactions with George Harrison.
oh,
And
terrible.
it was
Yeah,
almost like he was spanking the little boy in the room. And Harrison felt like, well, tell me what to do. And
yeah, and I'll just do it.
I'll just do it. And it was kind of like, God, I never knew that part of it. But, I know there's all kinds of those kind of stories. And
Yeah, it was very complex there, but I would certainly say the key moment that changes everything is when Brian dies,
yeah,
because
yeah,
the dynamic has changed. And if Brian had lived, he would have managed. Well, you wouldn't have needed Alan Klein coming in to make all those problems within Apple and sacking people, and that's what then separates them. Because when Alan Klein comes in, John's convinced he's the guy to do it. He convinces George and Ringo, but Paul's opposed to it. And Paul, because he's now with Linda, it was um, it was Linda's father was Lee Eastman, entertainment lawyer from New York.
mhm,
He was the perfect guy to do it. But because the trust and the animosity and stuff was building up between John and Paul, it suddenly became three against one.
yeah,
And that is what then drives that divide.
yeah,
I mean, and you could say it's one of the ones we look at in the book is what if Paul doesn't meet Linda? Because if Paul doesn't meet Linda, Paul isn't then wanting Lee Eastman to come in and help fix the Beatles. So you don't have the divide. So there's lots of
right.
little events. But I think if you're going to the beginning of the end, and this is where we come back to what we were talking about at the beginning about Yoko. When Brian dies, this is before John and Yoko get together. That's the beginning of the end. They never properly recover from that.
Yeah, yeah. But how are we doing with time? I don't want to keep you too long and take advantage.
I'm fine.
Are we okay?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I don't want to disrespect you in taking advantage of the time, but it's so
I'm good. I'm good.
it's so interesting to me. So, Jane, thank you for that question, and I think that's a great answer.
Mm,
Charles Hallberg, a good friend of mine in a little town called Owine, Iowa, that's well known for bringing out a lot of musicians that have been popular in the state of Iowa, at least, or in the Midwest. He said, talk about Hamburg a little bit and
mm,
how grueling was, their schedule. uh, when before they got big, the 6 hour gigs and stuff that they had. Talk a little bit about Hamburg, because Hamburg, it's all about Liverpool, or what we hear here, or what I've heard in the States, but Hamburg doesn't really come up too often. So, what's the importance of Hamburg in the Beatles?
Again, it's almost like I've written these questions, and honestly, I haven't. But I just finished a documentary called No Hamburg, No Beatles.
Yeah.
That will be coming out in the States soon. They've just agreed that deal. And it looks at the importance of Hamburg. And John said, we were born in Liverpool, but we grew up in Hamburg.
Mhm.
If you don't get Hamburg, you don't get the Beatles. It was that important. When they get out there, they went in August 1960. They've only been a rock and roll group for 3 months, and they weren't particularly good.
Yeah.
Now, the reason they get out there is through Alan Williams, who's the first manager, and his business partner, Lord Woodbine, who rarely gets a mention. And it's Lord Woodbine who actually is the guy who convinces Alan to go out to Hamburg. And they meet the club owner out there, Bruno Koschmider. And through a very circuitous, all kinds of coincidences along the way, Alan and Lord Woodbine drive the Beatles out there in August 60. So Pete Best has just joined them as drummer a couple of days before they head out. So you got John Paul George, Stuart Sutcliffe, and Pete Best.
Mhm.
And they weren't particularly good.
Yeah.
But the conditions they were living in were terrible. But these are kids who want to be professional musicians.
And so, how old were they? When they got to Hamburg?
So we're 1960. So John is 19.
Okay.
Paul has just turned 18. Um, Pete, 18. And George is still 17.
Okay, so just teenagers, just
Yeah,
kids, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And Stuart was just like a couple of months older than John. So they're all around the same age.
Yeah.
They've got no idea what they're doing. When they first get up on stage that first night, they just stand there and play songs. And the club owner's saying, what are you doing? Your job is to play the music, bring people in off the street so they come in here and spend money. That was their job. And this phrase, Mac Show, which is make a show.
Uh-huh.
And so they learn, when they're in Hamburg, they learn how to be a band. They become really tight. They learn how to entertain a crowd. They know what songs work, what don't. And yes, for each night, they're playing between 6 and 8 hours
Yeah.
with
Amazing.
the occasional 15, 20-minute break.
Yeah. They must
Now,
they must have loved it, right? It wasn't, it was a labor of love. I mean,
absolutely, this is what they wanted to do. And they knew they had to work hard. This was their apprenticeship. This is where they go out as a nothing band. Nobody knows who they are in Liverpool, really.
Mhm.
When they come back at the end of 1960. Now, this is, again, it's one of those very, very big moments where it all could have gone wrong because with an argument between club owners, um, George is sent home because he's underage because there was a curfew in Hamburg. If you're under 18, you had to be home by 10 o'clock at night. Well,
Yeah.
there's George at 17, 2 o'clock in the morning. He's still on stage.
Yeah.
So he was told, go home or we'll arrest you and deport you. So George goes home. In trying to move to a different club, the original guy who had the contract, Bruno Koschmider, says, you can't play anywhere else. And they said, we're Beatles, we can do what we want. And he said, well, no, you can't. Here's a contract. They didn't care about that. So Koschmider then tells the police that Paul McCartney and Pete Best are trying to burn down his cinema. And so Hamburg police turn up, put them in handcuffs, take them to the airport, deport them. So they've been sent home. Stuart has fallen in love with local photographer Astrid. He stays there. John's on his own, thinking, I might as well go home. He goes home and doesn't get in touch with the others. So George had gone home first, didn't know that the others had gone home as well. And through a mixture of Alan Williams and Lord Woodbine on one part of it, and Pete Bestman Mona as well, they say, don't split up, you've got to keep going. And over the Christmas 1960, they play four very significant gigs. The most important one being 27th of December 1960 in North Liverpool, a place called Litherland Town Hall. Now, back then, all the groups were dance groups. So they were hired to play songs like were on the records so people could dance.
Right. Right.
So last minute, these are sent on to the program. And they're just builders direct from Hamburg, the Beatles. Well, nobody knew who they were, so they just assumed they were a German group.
Yeah.
So they go on stage, everybody else is in suits and ties. They go on jeans, cowboy boots, leather jackets, long
Jackets.
hair, everything turned up loud. Paul launches into Long Tall Sally, and everybody stops dancing and goes, "Wow, what the heck was that?" And instead of dancing, they go to the stage and are entertained by the Beatles. It's almost like inventing the modern gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
We take for granted that's what we do.
Mhm.
That's what they do. And nobody had seen a band anything like them.
Yeah.
It blew all the competition off the stage.
It's almost like a screenplay that was written, you know. It sounds like a movie, but
Absolutely right.
was the real
And
thing.
it was real. Yeah. And so then every promoter in Liverpool wants to book the Beatles. But then they want to go back to Germany to play at this club called the Top Ten. So it takes the club owner Peter Eckhorn in Hamburg, plus Alan Williams, plus Mona Best. Paul and Pete have to write an apology to the German police and say, "We're good boys. We will stay good boys. We don't drink. We don't do anything like that." Liars. Um, and we'll behave ourselves because they've been deported. So they're allowed to go back in under license as long as they promise to be good.
Yeah.
So they go back in April 61. And this is where you talk about a grueling thing. So 92 nights consecutively between April and July 1961, the Beatles are on stage every night.
Well, how can you not get good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really. What's the thing if you do something for 10,000
10,000 hours. Yeah.
or whatever? But these guys had, a crazy amount of, God-given talent.
Absolutely right. And, George Harrison said they were at the best in 1961 at the Top 10 Club in Hamburg. He said that the venue was brilliant, the PA system was great, we were tightest as a band. And John said if you never saw the Beatles in the black leathers in Liverpool and Hamburg, you never saw the real Beatles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where, particularly that 1961 trip, because they're learning from a guy called Tony Sheridan and they're playing on stage with him. And he was a brilliant musician. They learned so much. And while they're there, they make a record as Tony Sheridan and the Beat Brothers called My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean.
Right.
That's released in Germany and gets into the hit parade. That's the record that the fans in Liverpool go into Brian Epstein's record store and say, "We want My Bonnie by the Beatles." He tracks it down to Germany, imports the copies. They sell out. Brian wants to know who's this Liverpool group who can sell records. He goes to the cavern and he signs them.
Wow. So what if, right?
Exactly, exactly. If there's no Hamburg, it just doesn't happen. There's no Beatles. It doesn't happen.
So when they were allowed to go back and play, George was allowed to go with them. He just
He's
had to
18.
behave, and he older? Was he able
Yeah,
to?
yeah. 'Cause his birthday is February, so he was 18 in February 61.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Not that I have anything like the Beatles, but when I was, 12 years old, when I was 13, I was asked to play in a drums for a country band in our little community called Johnny Clendenin and the Impalas. Played, all the, 50s and 60s rock and roll stuff.
Brilliant.
Yep, right. And some Beatles stuff, of course. And I was 13 and they played in a bar every Friday and Saturday night. My dad was like one of the most upstanding citizens, if you will, of our community. He was a mayor of the community at that time. And they asked him, can Jimmy play drums for us in this tap? And we play from 9 to 2 o'clock, and he'll get paid $8 a night. And would you allow him to play? And I was allowed just because they said we'll take care of him. and oh boy, did they take care of me, if you know what I mean. Right? And that's kind of where, my chops came from. And it's
Yeah,
kind of like that same thing,
that's how you learn.
yeah, you go back and do it. So, one of the questions I have from Ann Barker from Owine, she asked, "What do you think, David, was their happiest moment? What is the happiest moment that they had in as a group? Do you think?"
Happiest moment, I would say landing at JFK, 7th of February 64. America was always, I mean, that's the land of their heroes.
Yes.
All the music they covered was by American artists.
Right.
This was the place they'd dreamed about, they'd read about, they'd seen films about. This was the place that no British artist had cracked. This is where they wanted to be,
Yeah.
with the guys who provided the music that inspired them. When they land, they had no concept of who was going to be there. And all these screaming kids at JFK, and then they're being mobbed everywhere.
Yeah.
That was just unbelievable to them.
So were the screaming kids, was that set up by was how did that happen? I mean, was it just young people had heard about them and just fell in love with them even before they landed?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I interviewed lovely lady who's become a good friend of mine, Judith Kristen. She was one of the screaming teenagers, and she's told her story in a lovely little book called "A Date with a Beatle." It's only a little book, but honestly, it'll be one of the greatest reads you'll ever get. It's a fantastic book, wonderful. And see that the whole build up to Ed Sullivan is not just, oh, Ed Sullivan rings Brian, says, I believe you've got a famous band, can I book them? It's a whole series of events, of weird coincidences and setups, how they end up there. So in the UK in 1963, they've started at the beginning of the year, nobody really knows them. Within a matter of 3 or 4 months, they got number one single, number one album. They're touring the UK. They've supported Roy Orbison, who by the end of the tour has become second billing to the Beatles.
Okay. Okay.
And then by the time you get into October, the term Beatlemania had been coined because of the screaming kids wherever they're playing.
Yeah.
So because of that, CBS News decided to do a little feature on them. So they have a reporter down there, I think it was in Bournemouth, and the Beatles were playing and they're speaking to all the fans, and he's talking about this new phenomena of Beatlemania. So that show, the first time the Beatles appear on television, goes out on the morning of the 22nd of November 1963 as a feature and would have been the main feature in the evening. But of course, events in Dallas
Yeah.
overtake everything, don't they, on that day?
Yes. Yeah.
And so suddenly you've got JFK assassinated, and where the Beatles are going to be the main feature is dropped. A few weeks later, I think it's Walter Cronkite had said, um, where's that feature we did on that fun band from Britain? We need something to cheer us up. And they then put the feature back on as a main thing on CBS, and the place goes wild. So everyone's starting to get an interest. Sid Bernstein, New York promoter, has got in touch with Brian and says, I want to book your band to play at Carnegie Hall. And it just on the hope that he could do it. So they agree a deal to play there.
Yeah.
So then Capitol Records, who are part of the EMI group, who own the Beatles label Parlophone, they're refusing to put out Beatles singles. So instead of them coming out on Capitol, independent labels Swan and VJ had been releasing Beatles songs,
I didn't
and they
know.
weren't.
I
Yeah,
didn't know the capital
yeah,
thing.
yeah. They weren't. The songs weren't doing anything. So then again, it's all these things. So there's a girl called Marsha Albert, and she hears of I Want to Hold Your Hand, and she tells a local DJ about it. He's got a friend who's an air stewardess. She brings a copy back from London and gives it to him. So Marsha Albert goes on local radio and says, Here's this great new group from England, the Beatles, with the song "I Want to Hold Your Hand." That goes out, and the switchboard lights up. And then he goes and tells, and of course everything gets syndicated and stuff.
Right.
So now suddenly radio stations are playing "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and Capital go, "Hang on a sec, that's one of our groups." So
Uh-huh.
they get in touch with the DJ and say, "You can't play that." And he said, "Well, yeah, I can, because this is a UK single."
Mhm.
He had well within his rights.
Sure.
So then Ed Sullivan's got a guy over in the UK, just like talent spotting and things like that. He has witnessed Beatlemania going on and said to Ed Sullivan, "You need to find out about this group, the Beatles." In the meantime, Brian Epstein comes over and doing some promotion with one of his other singers, Billy J. Kramer, sets up a meeting with Ed Sullivan, and they agree a deal. And the Beatles aren't going to be paid a lot of money, but Brian knows that's where they need to be.
Yeah.
So now that's agreed. They go back to Capitol and say, "Are you sure you don't want to put this record out?" And just before Christmas '63, they go, "Do you know what? You're right, we're going to. So we're going to spend $40,000 and go completely over the top. This massive campaign, the Beatles are coming." They commandeer every record plant they can get hold of in the States,
Yeah.
anywhere that can print or the record sleeves. And just after Christmas, "I Want to Hold Your Hand" comes out and starts getting airplay everywhere. Then they appear on the Jack Parr show in January, and they showed a clip from Britain, which they shouldn't have done, but they still did. Suddenly, then the newspapers and the teen magazines are picking up this whole thing about Beatlemania. So by the time the Beatles land, "I Want to Hold Your Hand" is at number one in the charts. The timing of everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely perfect.
What an amazing time. Good grief. I mean, so I just got a couple more questions.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Darn it, Dave, I could be here all day long.
We can
But
always do a part two anytime, don't worry.
um, another person asked me when they were touring, and when they were busy in their lives, even when they went different directions, when did they find the time to record or to write songs? When was the time writing? How did they
On
find
the
it
road, on
on
the
the
road. Yeah, because their agreement with George Martin at Parlophone was 2 albums a year, and I think it was like 4 or 5 singles. And in the UK, singles were not on the albums, so you couldn't just
I didn't know
record some
that.
songs and release a couple. Capitol did completely different. Capitol would say there was a UK album comes out with 14 songs on.
Yeah,
Capitol would use the same name normally and only release 10 songs on that. And then every now and again could create a new LP
sure.
cobbled together from other singles and ones that weren't on the American albums. So the albums are different in the
Yeah.
States than they were in the UK, which really annoyed the Beatles.
Mm. Yeah,
They hated that.
was in a rough.
Um, so they would have to write while they're on the road. And then, because if you look at '63 in particular, that they did about 4 UK tours, and they weren't logical ones going from town to town. They were up like at the north end of England, then they were down the south, then over in the east, then over in the west, and they were all over the place. It
Yeah,
was non-stop, relentless, but they were writing songs on the road, and even found time to write more songs that they gave to other artists to record as well. They were that prolific. I mean, they'd written a lot before they got their record deal,
yeah,
but not many of them were good enough. It
yeah,
was really once he got together with George Martin, he really inspired them and pushed them, and he took them to another level.
yeah.
And suddenly, it all just flowed because all they were doing, and I think the concerts they were now playing were maybe 25 minutes, 30 minutes at the most.
Right.
What's that to a band who was playing 6 or 8 hours a
Uh-huh,
night in Hamburg?
uh-huh.
That was luxury. And eventually that's what killed off their touring. They got so bored of playing the same 10 songs at every concert.
Yeah.
Whereas in Hamburg, they had probably about 300 songs they knew.
And they
They
had
could pick.
the
choose anything.
yeah,
Yeah,
freedom to improvise and
yeah,
do stuff that they just couldn't do in uninterrupted,
exactly.
right?
So that's what they had to do. They had to write on the road
That's great.
and then fit it in and then record. And you think, right up to the mid 60s, they're only recording on 4 tracks,
Hmm.
which meant so much of the song performance was performed live, bounced down a couple of tracks. There's only so much you can do. So again, it's credit to them as musicians, George Martin as their producer, but the engineers who work with them, absolute geniuses.
Yeah, yeah,
And so they'd only have like maybe 10 days to record an album.
mm, yeah. Um, so thank you, Rob Tatro, for that question. That
Good question.
yeah, that was a great question. So you've written, but but they're hard to get a hold of, David. What's the deal with this whole thing? I wanted to talk about the 23 drummers. Uh,
Yeah,
the
finding
find.
the fourth Beatle.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that I can get the book, or if I can, good God, man, like $100 or something for your, they're hard to get. Uh,
Yeah, I'm going to find a way to
in that. What's driving?
republish that. So Liddypool, my first book, has just sold out its third print edition.
Yeah,
So I'm trying to get a fourth edition ready for that.
good.
The Fab 104, the evolution of the Beatles, there are still some of those left. That personally is my favorite of the books that I've written.
Which one?
Um, Fab 104, the
Okay,
evolution of the Beatles.
okay.
Um, just some of the research and stuff I was able to do, the interviews in there. I loved that book. So there's a few of those left. The Find the Fourth Beatle, yeah, that's sold out, but I'm working on a new edition
Well,
to
damn
get
it,
that out.
because I want that book.
Yeah.
Drummer, and so I'm enthralled with the 23 drummers, from 1956 to 1970.
I would have to say though, the 23 is wrong.
What is the number?
I found three more, so it's 26.
So wait a second. You're going to have the book, right? Because in the book it's 23, isn't it? But
Yep.
so there were 26 people from 1956. I was 2 years old. It's just hard for me to think of that, right? But that were part of them, and probably a lot of them that weren't so good, right? I mean, they were just kids that jammed with them and stuff. Is that who were some of the drum?
Um, Most of the time to qualify, you must have played with them live
Okay,
or on a record.
okay.
So
Well,
they went through a lot of drummers.
a lot of drummers, and of course, people can read the whole thing with Ringo Starr and how that whole thing happened. So, your book, The Beatles, What If,
Yep.
which is your backdrop, by the way. So, if anybody's
Yeah.
worrying about writing something down or forgetting, take it's right here. That's available right now. Um,
Yeah, yeah, we launched it in New York in March.
okay,
So
okay, fantastic, and sales are going well with that. I would assume.
yeah, very happy with that.
So,
Um, it's
so what's
fun.
next for you? You said you're still, you're doing more writing and so forth. But what's next for you? You're still a young man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for saying that. I've just turned 60, but
you're just a kid. I'm
I'll, I'll,
71.
I'll take young.
71. You're just a pony. Right. So what's next for you? What do you?
So at the moment, so while we were making the No Hamburg, No Beatles documentary, and obviously my job is historian in all these things. And I said, just to our little team, I said, do you know what? This would make a fantastic stage play because it's a great story. So much goes on. It's not that well known about. Plus, you don't need Beatles music to go with it, but you'd have the best rock and roll soundtrack.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done. Got a brilliant local writer called Ian Salmon, and it's going to have its world premiere in Liverpool in September, and it's
Fantastic.
called Shake It Up, Baby, which I'm very excited about. And then hopefully after that, so it's going to do an initial 2 week run, and then hopefully we'll travel the country, and if so, it could travel wherever. It's
Yeah, you can go anywhere.
yeah,
Uh, I'm looking forward to that. And one last thing, the Quarrymen. So
yes.
you're still playing, or you're playing. And I'm glad you're able to play. The fibromyalgia hasn't, taken that away from you.
Yeah,
And you stand on stage, so you're able to, stand. Maybe
I,
not.
I have some wonderful knee supports, which I've had for years, and for those and tablets and concentrating on the playing, I don't notice it then
Yeah,
till afterwards.
yeah. So tell us about the Quarrymen, and
Yep.
playing. That's got to be just so much fun, huh?
Oh, it's amazing. So obviously, I met these guys. It went to 2004 because I invited them to come and play at Dovedale School, being John, George, and Ivan Vaughan's old school. So they came and played, and I got to know them, and then done interviews with them and done many events with them, and then I was asked to go over to Germany to do a talk, and one of the books I'd written was called "The Country of Liverpool, Nashville at the North," because Liverpool had the biggest country and western scene in Britain, as well as all the beat music going on. So I was going out there to do a talk on that, and Rod Davis from the Quarrymen, he's like the historian for the group. He was invited out to do a talk on skiffle music. So they said it would work perfectly, the two of us. And Rod's going to do some songs, I was going to do some songs. But over the years, I'd never sort of mentioned that I played guitar. So Rod rang me up and said, "What's this I hear about you playing guitar?" I said, yeah, it's just something I do. Well, when we do our talks, do you want to do some songs together? I'm not going to say no to that one, am I?
Yeah, of course.
So I said, yeah, sure. Now he lives down in London, so we had no time to rehearse. If you ever try and do it by Zoom, it doesn't work because the
I, I
time
know.
delays. Yeah,
But
nightmare.
there is a way you can do it, right?
Yeah.
There is some.
So, but we worked out and said, right, we picked like 10 songs. He'd take the lead on five, I'd take the lead on five. And the first time we performed was just after we finished our talks. And we had this room of people. And we said, right, we don't know what's going to happen. We're just going to do these songs. And it just went down so well. And we had such fun doing it. Not long after that, Rod had said, well, do you want to come and join the Quarrymen and play with us? And again, am I going to say no to that?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we were due then to open at Strawberry Field. They got a bandstand, and we were opening the bandstand, official ceremony and everything. And the guy who was playing bass for the Quarrymen, Chas Newby, is someone I got to know years ago. He actually played bass with the Beatles in the Christmas of 1960. So that time when they all come back and it's chaos, Stuart stays in Hamburg. A guy called Chas Newby played bass with the Beatles, and I tracked him down and interviewed him. So we become friends.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks before we were due to play, because I was due to play on guitar, Chaz had a fall and couldn't play. So Rod rang me and said, right, Chaz can't play. You don't play bass by any chance? And he said, yeah, I can play bass. He said,
You
great.
you
Play.
said I'm going to learn. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to learn.
But I'd never performed playing bass.
Yeah,
But it's just I taught myself like I taught myself guitar and piano. I can't read music.
yeah,
But I taught myself to play bass in my teens. So I said, yeah, I can play. Right, so I had like 2 weeks to relearn everything just on bass. And so we go to, and we open at Strawberry Field. And we've got three of the original Quarrymen there. Colin Hanson, the drummer, Rod Davis, who was originally the banjo player, now playing guitar, and Len Gary, who was the TCS bass player, also playing guitar and singing, and me. And we just had so much fun doing it. So now we've been over to Germany a few times. Rod and I went to Brazil in January to headline a Beatles festival there
right, yeah.
with, and some lovely connection. The guy playing piano with us, Henry Dufflow, his father, John Dufflow, played piano with the Quarrymen in 1958.
Huh.
So it's nice. So we've got that lovely connection.
Sure.
So most of the time it's Colin and Rod for the originals,
Yeah.
Henry, John Dufflow's son, and me. And so we've got to play in St. Peter's Church Hall where John and Paul met. We got to play in Quarrybank Hall stage, the very first place the Quarrymen ever played in 1956.
Yeah.
In August, we're playing at the Philharmonic Hall in Liverpool, where Buddy Holly played in 1958. And I get to spend all this time with these guys because Colin lives like 5 minutes away from me. So I see him on a regular basis anyway. And
Yeah,
if ever we're traveling abroad, he and I travel together.
yeah,
So I just get to spend so much time with these lovely guys who are great musicians, and I just get all these stories, and it is such a privilege. It
sure.
really is absolute privilege.
Yeah, yeah, you're fortunate. So, I know what it must be like to have an idea of what it must be like to get on the stage or and stages where, the Beatles had been or, famous people had been. One of my favorite places is the Surf Ballroom in Mason City in Clear Lake, Iowa.
Mm.
And of course, it was the last place that Buddy Holly
Buddy
played,
Holly, of course.
before the music died, before he killed. And so, I played that ballroom several
Wow.
times. And David, what is, speaking of kind of haunting things, but when you go and you play there, of course, you have access to the backstage and the dressing room there. And the walls have been littered with the signatures, the autographs of all the musicians who have passed
Wow.
through that ballroom. So, when you go to play a job there, and you're standing there and you're looking in this room and you're looking around, realizing, Buddy Holly was here and the Big
Wow.
Bopper was here, and of course, famous big bands,
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
all have their signatures, and the feeling you get, much like you must get
yeah,
when
yeah,
you walk on the stages of places, where you go.
yeah.
It's fabulous. And so,
It's an amazing privilege, and like you were saying at the very beginning, none of this was planned in my life at all.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and one of the things I'm trying to do something about, and it's like with your book about the 144 letters,
yeah,
I was reading all about that, is that I'm in the process now of writing my story about how to live with a chronic condition, but how to thrive with a chronic condition. I want to try and give hope to people and say, all right, I never expected any of this, never wanted any of this, but it's been able to turn to a positive. I've had this amazing second life in a way,
yeah,
which I never would have had if I didn't fall ill.
yeah,
And now I see it as a blessing of disability.
as a gift, right?
Yeah. And I want to communicate that to people and try and say, look, no, it's not been an easy ride at all. It's been very bumpy at times, but I say it's family, friends, faith, and Fab Four is my alliteration for it. That's what's got me here. None of which was planned, but it is an amazing,
Yeah,
amazing time that I've been having. And if that was it, it was ended tomorrow, and I wasn't going to do any more Beatles projects. I couldn't complain.
yeah.
All I was looking for when my first book got published was to go to a bookstore and see it on the bookshelf.
I know the feeling.
I was content. That was it.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
wasn't bothered how well it sold. That I was content.
I'm glad you were led in that direction, and you've made good from something that was perfectly bad and
Yeah.
awful, right? So where can people find you? And I know your books, Amazon has everything when they're available,
Yeah.
but how can people get a hold of you, or what would you like people to do with you to stay in touch with you?
Okay, so I've got a website which is nice and simple, davidabedford.com.
Okay.
That's it, davidabedford.com.
Okay.
Because I'm a tour guide as well. So I've been out today doing a Beatles tour for a father and son from Ohio
Yeah.
today, taking them around. So I get to tell these stories while taking them around Liverpool and showing them how important Liverpool was to
Yeah.
the Beatles. So yeah, I got all these things that I get to do, but everything you can reach everything through that website.
Great. Well, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for you went overtime today. So, boy, you're going to get a really big check from me for this one.
Well, we'll cancel it out with the introduction you made, so I'm good with that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, and everybody go out and get David's book and or books and stay in touch. I know there's videos of David playing with the Quarrymen on YouTube. You can have a lot of fun with that. And really, he's the historian that you need to know if there's anything about the Beatles that you love. And David, hang tight. And to my audience, thank you so much for being here today. This was a real privilege for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.